One of the highlights every year is the presentation in Bradford of the students, the Peace Scholars, ones that have been there for a year, give a presentation about themselves, about what the projects are that they're doing, and introducing the incoming scholars. And it's been a real pleasure for Di and myself to go to that every year, except unfortunately they couldn't go this year, but we've been for many years. I had a great pleasure on one occasion, a few years ago, of meeting Dragana, and it's a real joy that she's been able to find time to come and share some thoughts with you as a Peace Fellow about peace and reconciliation. Dragana.
Thank you, Mr. President, for that great introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm very glad to be here with you today, and thank you very much for the invitation. I enjoyed last night getting to know about 15 Rotarians from Colchester area and had a great time with them. I can hear them in the audience, and I hope to get to know them more as I moved from Bradford to Colchester last year. In the next 20 minutes or so, I will tell you more about, sorry, I think the slides. In the next 20 minutes or so, I will tell you more about peace and conflict, my own interest in the field, and the way the Rotary works to promote peace and goodwill around the globe. Let's see if this works. Okay, so in the last 12 years, Rotary has trained 900 people in an area of peace building, and there are about 6 Rotary centers around the globe, and I studied at the University of Bradford, as we heard, with 11 other Rotary Peace Fellows, with whom I created great friendships and did some very interesting projects, and we are still in touch today. We received training in several areas, in international relations, sustainable development, mediation and conflict resolution, governance, education, policy making, peace and conflict research, and the list goes on. So what I'm particularly interested in is peace and conflict research, and I will tell you more about it in the following slides. One of the centers that Rotary finally added to their list is the Research Center on Peace and Conflict at the University of Uppsala. It's one of the best research centers in the world on peace and conflict, and it has been collecting data on armed conflicts for the last 40 years. So this map here is created based on the data that's been collected by the researchers at the Uppsala University, and we can see that in 2013, many countries have been involved in armed struggle. There's often a perception that research and academia is kind of locked in the offices somewhere at the academic institutions and far away from public eye, but that's not the case. All the data, for instance, that University of Uppsala collects is available online. So if you want to do some data analysis later on after the lunch break, feel free to go on their website and look at it. But you might want to ask, is all this data valuable for something else? Are we just collecting data to create fancy maps and publish academic papers? And I hope to present the case or convince you that that's not the case, that we need all this data to be able to understand why conflicts emerge. So we have to have a better understanding of causes and motives, and data that Uppsala has can help us with that. We know that politicization of ethnic, cultural, and political differences affects and is one of the main causes of conflicts. Groups engage in conflicts over territory, resources, and governance. Motives behind can be genuine grievances where we have excluded and marginalized populations that don't have access to power, and because they are suffering inequalities, they use all the means necessary to better their political and social status. So they have genuine grievances and they engage in conflict because of that. But there are also groups and governments that engage in conflicts in order to achieve their own material benefits. There are many more variables, and conflict is very complex, as we heard from today and as we heard from Director of International Alert. So we really need a systematic way to approach something like this. And in addition to understanding why, we also want to know when and where conflicts emerge. So this is another graph that's based on the data, and you can see pretty well, okay, good. That's based on data from Uppsala. So we can see on the horizontal axis we have years. They have information about armed conflicts from 1946 to 2013. And then on the vertical axis we have number of conflicts per year in a region. So we have Europe in blue, Americas in gray, Middle East in black, Africa in red, and Asia in yellow. And if we look particularly in the region, in the time of 1990s, we can see that there was an increase in number of conflicts across all the regions in the world. And then, following that, in 2011, we see a slight decrease. So it is true that number of armed conflicts has been decreasing, and in particular in regions of Asia and Africa. So we want to be able to explain and understand these trends in conflict, escalation and de-escalation. And for that, we need to study conflict over time and over various contexts. And that's not an easy task at all. So we heard that, and we saw that number of violent conflicts is on decrease, but number of non-violent conflicts is on increase. What are non-violent conflicts? Well, those are social protests, boycotts, and mass mobilization of people and resources to demand and protest against government's decisions. This map here shows the emergence of nonviolent campaigns against the government for the last 40 years across the globe. And this map has been created thanks to data collection efforts from the University of Denver. The map indicates, the green indicates that nonviolent campaigns against the government were successful where countries transitioned from autocracy to democracy. Now we can debate how successful these transitions were, but one thing is for certain is that nonviolent campaigns are risky for both governments and people who engage in nonviolent campaigns. The word nonviolent might be misleading. There are certain risks involved. There are certain risks for people who are involved in this because they risk being repressed and physically repressed by police and security forces. They're also risky for the governments because, as we can see, there are numerous countries where regime was overthrown due to these campaigns. So what I'm particularly interested in and what I hope to be able to contribute to in my research and my work is what is the role of ethnicity in emergence of violent and non-violent conflicts. And why is ethnicity so interesting? Well, first of all, it's something that's kind of determined by birth to which ethnic group we belong to. We can change later on, but majority of people decide to stay or identify themselves with a particular ethnic group. So it's not something that we really choose, but it's something that later on can affect a lot of things in our social and political lives. It can affect belonging to a particular ethnic or political or social group can predispose us for certain risk for experiencing conflict, experiencing economic hardships, discrimination, and other forms of violence. And so, And so we want to actually know how ethnicity affects conflicts around the world. If we look at the map, the green indicates countries that are more ethnically diverse. And there are numerous studies that looked into conflicts in countries in Africa and found that ethnicity greatly affects levels of trust, levels of community participation, and also is related to poor economic performance. Now, this is a pretty dark picture, but there is still hope. For instance, we can see that Canada is also very ethnically diverse, but it's very economically and politically successful and functioning state. So it's not just ethnicity that affects conflict. There are other variables too. Again, this is a very complex field. So we want to know when, where, and how ethnicity matters in research and in our daily lives. So in research, we look into things such as political and economic inequalities, past conflicts, governance, territory, and we want to see how ethnicity affects these conditions. For instance, here, this is a distribution of ethnic groups in former Yugoslavia. And we can see this region in the center is very ethnically diverse. And this is where, unfortunately, during the conflict in 1990s, the conflict was of the most intensity, and a lot of people lost their lives. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, close to 200,000